The wind screamed across the frozen land, sharp like a knife. Aria pulled her thin coat tighter. But it did nothing. She was not made for this kind of cold. Her small pet, a soft-furred creature named Luma, shivered in her arms. She hugged it close, hoping her body heat would keep it alive a little longer. The sky was dark with storm clouds, and the sun hadn't been seen in days. Her shuttle had crashed 3 nights ago, far from any city. No signal had gone through, no help had come. She had only 1 blanket, 1 broken heater, and now, not even 1 bite of food left. Luma looked up at her with wide, glowing eyes. He didn't make a sound, but she could feel his fear. She smiled weakly and touched her forehead to his. "It's okay," she whispered, though her lips were cracked and shaking. "We'll sleep, just for a little while." She sat under the broken wing of the shuttle. Snow building up fast, metal creaked and groaned above her. She knew soon it would collapse, but she was too tired to move. The cold had gone past pain. Now it just felt empty, like her body didn't belong to her anymore. Her eyes started to close. Luma whimpered softly. She hugged him tighter. "I'm sorry," she said. "I tried." Just then, a sound broke through the wind. A crunching noise, footsteps, not animal steps, but heavy, slow, careful ones. Aria didn't believe it at first. She thought she was dreaming. But the sound came again, closer, clearer. Then a shadow appeared through the snowstorm. It was tall, wrapped in thick gear from head to toe. Snow clung to its shoulders, but it kept walking, closer and closer, until it stood right in front of her. Aria blinked slowly. Her vision was blurry. Luma hissed weakly in her arms, but she couldn't even raise her hand. The figure knelt down and spoke in a strange language. It didn't sound like any word she knew, but the voice was calm, deep, and somehow kind. Strong hands reached out and lifted her up. She wanted to scream, to fight, but her body didn't move. She held on to Luma with all the strength she had left. The figure wrapped them both in a thick blanket and began walking. Snow fell harder, and the wind screamed louder. But she felt warmer now, not because of the blanket, but because someone had come. Someone had found her. She opened her eyes once more and saw a small hatch in the ground. The figure opened it and climbed down, holding her gently. Warm air hit her face for the first time in days. She smelled cooked food, fire, and something sweet. The door closed behind them, and the howling wind was gone. Lights flickered on, soft yellow lights, not like the cold blue lights of her ship. He placed her on a bed made of thick cloth. She curled around Luma and watched as the figure took off its hood. It was a human, a real human. She had seen pictures in old books, heard stories, many of them scary, but this one didn't look scary. He looked tired, his face covered in frost, his eyes serious but kind. He spoke again, slow and gentle. Still, she didn't understand. He pointed at a bowl of warm soup and pushed it toward her. She didn't move, but Luma sniffed the air and made a tiny sound. The human smiled, then turned away to start a fire. Aria stared at him, confused and afraid. Why was he here? What did he want? No humans were supposed to be on this planet. Her people said they were dangerous, violent, and greedy. But this one saved her. This one gave her warmth, food, and shelter. She watched him from the bed. Her hands still shaking, Luma rested against her chest, finally calm. She didn't trust him, not yet, but deep down, part of her felt safe for the first time since the crash. Outside, the snow kept falling. The cold still ruled the world above. But underground, in that strange human shelter, Aria was alive, and her story was just beginning. Aria woke slowly, her body stiff and sore. For a moment, she forgot where she was. There was no wind, no snow on her face, and no pain in her fingers. She was lying on soft cloth, wrapped in a thick blanket. Warm air brushed against her skin, and Luma was curled up beside her, still breathing. She blinked and looked around. The room was small, with smooth metal walls and blinking lights. A strange smell hung in the air, part fire, part something sweet and cooked. She sat up slowly, feeling dizzy, her head heavy like a stone. That's when she saw him again. The human. He was sitting on the floor, working on something made of metal and wires. He didn't look up, but he spoke in his deep, strange voice. His words were soft, but she didn't understand a single one. He glanced back at her and gave a small nod, like he was glad she was awake. She watched him quietly, unsure what to do. Her people said humans were clever but dangerous. They said humans took what they wanted, destroyed what they didn't need. But this one had given her food, warmth, and safety. He stood up and walked over. Holding a steaming cup, he pointed at it, then placed it gently in front of her. Aria stared at the cup, the steam making her nose tingle. She sniffed it, then took a tiny sip. It was warm and sweet, with a taste like melted fruit. The human smiled again, then tapped his chest and said, "Ray." She frowned, not understanding. He tapped again, "Ray." After a moment, she understood his name was Ray. She looked down at Luma, still curled up on the blanket. He was better now, breathing easier, his fur no longer wet with snow. Aria gently touched his tiny paw and whispered a soft thanks. Then she looked up at Ray and whispered, "Aria." He repeated it slowly, careful not to get it wrong. Ria. It sounded strange in his voice, but not unkind. The next hours passed in silence, broken only by soft sounds, tools clicking, machines humming, the fire crackling. Ray worked on a large screen filled with alien symbols. Aria sat nearby, watching everything. His tools were strange but also familiar. One of them glowed with blue light, the color of the ancient ones. She moved closer to see better, but he stopped her with a gentle hand. He didn't want her near it. She sat back down, pretending to rest, but her eyes stayed on that glowing tool. Later, when Ray went to sleep, Aria stood up quietly. She crept over to the workbench, her fingers shaking. The tool was unlike anything she'd seen before, but something inside her felt drawn to it. She reached out slowly and touched it. A sudden spark flashed across her hand, but it didn't burn. Instead, her fingers glowed faintly blue for a moment. Then the tool came to life, lights blinked, a soft hum filled the air, and the large screen across the room flickered. Ancient symbols danced across it, symbols from her people's oldest language. Aria stepped back, heart racing. She hadn't spoken them, but the screen had responded to her touch. She looked at her hand, still glowing slightly. Luma stirred behind her, sensing the change. Ray woke up with a jolt, his eyes going straight to the screen. He jumped to his feet, shouting something in his language. But when he saw Aria's glowing hand, he froze. He didn't yell again, he just stared, eyes wide with something between fear and wonder. The screen now showed a map, an old one, with lines drawn through stars and planets. At the center was this frozen planet, and beneath it, something hidden. Ray looked at the map, then at Aria. He stepped forward and gently took her hand. The glow faded, but the warmth stayed. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. In that moment, both of them knew something old and powerful had awakened, and Aria was part of it. Deep underground, far beneath the shelter, a pulse of light traveled through stone and ice. Old machines stirred. Systems long asleep blinked to life for the first time in centuries. Something was watching, waiting, and now it had found her. The storm had passed, but the cold remained. Ray worked silently near the heater, fixing a broken wire. Aria sat in the corner, holding Luma, eyes fixed on the strange map still glowing on the wall screen. The lines moved slowly, showing deep tunnels beneath the ice. Symbols shifted every few seconds, old ones, from a language no one used anymore. Except the machines. Ray didn't ask how she did it. He just watched her now, like she was no longer just a lost alien girl. He showed her food, water, blankets, but he also kept glancing at her hand, the one that made the screen light up, the one that woke the ruins. That night, when Ray left the shelter with his backpack, he pointed at the door, then made a motion with his hand stay. But Aria waited only a few minutes before following him. She wrapped herself in the warmest coat she could find. placed Luma in a sling over her shoulder, and slipped outside. The snow had stopped, and moonlight reflected off the frozen world like glass. She moved quietly, careful not to leave deep footprints. Ray walked fast but not far. He moved toward a ridge near a cliff and disappeared behind it. Aria followed at a distance, her breath fogging in the cold air. She peeked over the rocks and saw an entrance in the ground, hidden under ice and stone. Ray placed his hand on the wall and said a word. The wall opened, slowly and silently. He stepped inside, and the entrance closed again like it had never been there. She waited for a long minute, then moved closer. Luma made a soft noise but didn't resist. Aria reached the wall and touched the same spot Ray had. Nothing happened. She placed her glowing hand on it, and the wall opened. At once, inside was a narrow tunnel lit by soft blue lights. The walls were smooth, made from black stone with silver veins that shimmered. Symbols appeared along the walls as she walked, like they were reading her. Luma tensed in her arms, and she held him tighter. She moved deeper until she saw a wide room below. Ray was down there, kneeling before a tall structure. It looked like a throne, but it was made of metal and glass, with tubes running through it like veins. He spoke to the machine in his language, and it responded, glowing brighter with each word. He didn't see her, not yet. She stepped back into the shadows, heart pounding. This was no normal ruin. This place was alive, awake, and somehow, Ray was not just a visitor. He was part of it too. A soft hum filled the air, and the lights above began to flicker. Luma jumped from her arms and ran forward, his small paws silent against the stone. He climbed the structure and placed his head against the glass. The machine glowed again, but this time, brighter, faster. It was responding to him, not Ray, not even him. Aria stepped forward, unable to stop herself. Ray turned quickly, shocked to see her there. He said something sharp, a warning maybe. But the machine didn't stop. The throne opened in the center, revealing a glowing core. Inside was a floating crystal, pulsing with a soft blue light. The moment Aria looked at it, her head filled with sound echoes of voices, songs, cries, and words in a forgotten tongue. She fell to her knees, clutching her ears. But it wasn't pain, it was memory. Not hers, but someone's long ago. Ray ran to her, pulled her away, and the sound stopped. But the damage was done. The crystal dimmed again. But the room stayed alive. The air was warm now, buzzing, like it knew what she was, and it was waiting for her to return. Ray stared at her with eyes full of questions. He pointed to the crystal, then pointed at her, then at Luma. She didn't know the words, but she understood the meaning. The machine had responded to all three of them. She whispered the word she had heard in the echoes. Relian. Ray's eyes widened. He knew that word too. Ancient, powerful, lost to time, but not forgotten. Luma sat quietly at her feet, his eyes now glowing faintly. Not just a pet, not just an animal. Something more, something older, far above them. Deep under the ice, machines began to move. Lights blinked across the ruins hidden in the ground and far beyond the planet's sky. Something heard the signal, something that had waited for this moment. Now it was coming. Asterisk. The sky cracked open. With light, Aria looked up from the cave entrance, her heart pounding. It was not the sun, and it was not the moon. It was something falling from space. Glowing red, trailing fire. Ray saw it too, standing beside her in the snow. He didn't speak, but his body stiffened like a soldier preparing for war. The glowing object crashed far off in the mountains, shaking the ground. A strange silence followed, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Ray ran back to the shelter with Aria close behind. Inside, he opened a box hidden in the wall and pulled out weapons, ones she had never seen before. They looked old, like the machines in the ruins, but sharper, heavier. He loaded something into one and handed another to her. She held it with shaking hands, not understanding, but knowing it meant danger was coming. Luma paced the floor, restless. His fur stood on end, and his eyes glowed brighter than ever. He was sensing something long before it arrived. Ray powered down the lights and checked the outside camera. 3 ships had landed, dark and long. Shaped like knives in the snow, figures stepped out, wrapped in armor like shadows. Not human, and not from Arya's world either. She had seen them once on a warning poster back home. Void Raiders, her people called them, pirates from the dark parts of space, cruel, fast and silent. Ray said a word under his breath and tapped the screen. The shelter lights faded to black. Arya and Luma moved to the far wall while Ray knelt by the door. The ground above creaked softly, then boots hit the snow. There was no sound from the raiders, not a word, not a whisper. They moved like smoke, scanning the area with strange red lights. One of them stopped near the shelter's entrance and looked down. Ray gripped his weapon tighter, his finger ready. Then something strange happened. Luma let out a sharp cry, not of fear, but of warning. It echoed through the shelter like a bell. The lights above blinked once, and the walls vibrated gently outside. The raider backed away suddenly, but it was too late. The snow around them exploded upward as a ring of ancient energy burst from the ground. Blue lightning arced through the air, hitting the raiders' weapons, disabling them. Ray opened the hatch and stepped out without fear. He moved like he had done this before. He aimed and fired, and the weapon hissed, not loud, but strong. One raider dropped instantly, the other scattered into the storm. Arya climbed out after him, holding her own weapon. Though she didn't know how to use it, she didn't need to. The ancient energy from the ruins was rising around them. It responded to her presence, protecting her, guiding her. But the fight wasn't over. The raiders regrouped and pulled out something darker, a black orb, pulsing with red veins. Ray's eyes widened when he saw it. He shouted at Arya to run, but before she could move, the orb burst with a blast of force. The world turned white. Arya hit the ground hard, her ears ringing. When she opened her eyes, Luma was gone. She searched the snow desperately, but he was nowhere. Ray crawled over to her, wounded and bleeding. From his side, he pointed toward the mountains where the raiders had come from. They had taken Luma. Arya stood up, her knees weak, but her face hard with rage. The snow fell again, quiet and slow. Ray tried to stop her, but she shook her head. She would not leave her friend behind. He saved her life with his warmth, his loyalty. Now it was her turn. She turned toward the mountains without fear. Deep inside, something old awakened in her again. The machines in the ice, the crystal in the ruins, the language in her blood. All of it burned like fire through her veins. Far away, Luma cried out in the dark, and the ruins listened. Snow crunched under her boots as Arya moved through the white forest. Each step was slow, careful. The cold bit at her skin, but she didn't stop. She didn't care about the wind or pain. She only cared about one thing, finding Luma. Ray followed her in silence, his wound wrapped tightly with cloth. He had tried to lead, but Arya knew where to go. She could feel it. Something deep inside her was guiding her feet. A voice with no words, a pull that came from the earth itself. They reached a broken ridge of sharp black rocks. Beyond it lay a wide clearing of ice, cracked and glowing faintly. At the center was a dark camp with 3 ships parked like monsters sleeping in the snow. And inside a glowing cage, Luma. He was not moving, but his eyes were open. Even from far away, Arya could feel his fear, but also something else. A pressure, a spark building inside him like lightning trapped in glass. Ray set up his weapon and scanned the area. He spoke softly in his language, pointing to the raiders walking near the cages. Arya crouched beside him, her breath quick and white in the air. She couldn't wait for a plan. She couldn't wait for safety. Luma didn't have time. She slipped away into the shadows, moving low like a ghost. Ray tried to stop her, but she was already gone. Near the camp, the ground vibrated under her boots. She felt it rise through her legs and into her chest. It was Luma. His energy was rising. He was not just a pet, not just a creature born for warmth and comfort. He was something ancient, He was remembering. Aria reached the edge of the camp and climbed onto a low rock. Watching, waiting, a raider approached the cage and poked Luma with a long rod. There was a flash, blue light exploded outward, knocking the raider off his feet. The others turned. Confused, but then Luma stood up on all fours, his fur glowing with lines of silver light. His small body lifted slightly above the ground. His eyes burned like stars. He opened his mouth not to cry or bark, but to speak. A single word echoed. Across the camp, not loud, but deep, the machines in the raiders' ships froze. Lights flickered and died. The ice cracked beneath their feet. Aria's heart nearly stopped. She had heard that word before, in the ruins, in her dreams. In the crystal, it was not just sound, it was a command, an awakening, the cage holding. Luma broke apart in glowing pieces. The raiders raised their weapons, but nothing worked. Their tools were dead, their ships useless. Luma floated into the air and flew toward Aria, his body wrapped in light. She reached out, and he landed softly in her arms, warm, bright, alive, but not the same. His power had awakened something old, and now it lived inside him. Ray arrived. Behind her, wide-eyed, frozen in shock, Aria turned to him and spoke slowly. "I think he was never just a pet." Ray nodded, eyes still locked on Luma. Snow began to fall again, slow and quiet. The raiders ran into the distance, their ships smoking and broken. They didn't look back. Aria held Luma close, feeling his heartbeat strong, steady, full of fire. The ground trembled again. Not from battle, but from something rising, behind the camp. A wall of ancient stone pushed up through the ice, covered in symbols glowing blue. Luma jumped from her arms and walked toward it. The wall responded, opening slowly like a mouth from a dream. Inside was darkness, but it wasn't empty. Ray looked. At Aria, then at Luma, then back at the wall. They all knew what it meant. The secret had not just been buried. It had been waiting. Aria stepped through the gate. Not afraid, Luma walked ahead of her, tail glowing like a trail of light. Ray followed, his weapon ready. The air inside was warmer, alive, far behind them, on a distant moon. Something blinked for the first time in 1,000 years. It had heard the word, and now it was coming. Asterisk. The stone door closed behind them without a sound. Ree stepped into the darkness, her boots tapping against smooth ground. But the dark didn't last long. One by one, lights appeared on the walls, soft blue orbs waking up as they passed. The air felt warm, too warm for a place buried in snow. It smelled like old metal and clean rain. Luma walked ahead without fear, glowing from inside like a tiny star. His tail flicked side to side, and every time it touched the ground, the symbols lit up beneath it. Aria stayed close behind him, heart racing. Ray moved silently, eyes scanning everything, one hand always near his weapon. They entered a large hall with ceilings higher than any tree. At the center stood a giant column made of crystal and stone. It pulsed with a heartbeat, slow and strong. The ground shook softly beneath their feet. It was alive, just like the other ruin, but bigger. Older, louder. Luma jumped onto a low platform and sat down, still glowing. The column reacted instantly. Beams of light shot upward, and the walls changed shape. A new map appeared, floating in the air, one filled with stars. Gates and names lost to time. Aria reached toward the image, and it responded, zooming in on the icy planet. She saw tunnels deep below them, machines buried in silence, power waiting like breath held in a chest. Ray stepped beside her and pointed to a blinking dot far beneath the surface. It wasn't part of the map, it was moving. Coming closer, he spoke a single word: ship. Something was waking under the ice, not a ruin at all, a starship. Ancient and massive, forgotten under snow for lifetimes, and now it was turning on. Aria's hand hovered over a spinning symbol 1, shaped like a spiral sun. She touched it, and the room responded. The ground shook harder, walls opening to reveal long ramps, pipes and control panels. Machines lit up, and soft music filled the air, not notes, but a language, a voice that felt both new and old, speaking straight into her mind. She didn't know the words, but she understood. The ship was not built by humans, and not by her people either. It was made by those who came before both. The first ones, the ones who taught stars how to shine. Luma jumped off the platform and ran to a small opening at the base of the column. He placed his paw on a round stone, and the whole room hummed louder. The map blinked twice, then faded. The floor opened beneath them, forming a slow-moving lift. Ray looked at Aria with sharp eyes, but said nothing. He didn't need to. Whatever was down there, it wasn't just a ship. It was something left behind for someone who could wake it. Someone like Aria, someone like Luma. As they sank deeper, the lights above faded, and the light below grew stronger. The air became electric, full of strange pressure. Aria's chest felt tight, but not with fear, with weight. Like she was meant to be there, like the place had waited only for her. The lift stopped with a soft sound, and before them stood a large open space. A massive chamber filled with coiled engines and glowing roots of crystal. And at the center, a ship. Its body was smooth, like melted glass shaped by time, wings folded close, engines silent, but alive. Ray walked to it and placed his hand against the side. The ship lit up under his touch, responding to his blood. Aria stepped forward too, touching the other side. The glow brightened and wrapped around them both. Two signals, one human, one alien, but together, a match. Luma leapt into the air, and the ship opened with a low hum. A ramp stretched out, inviting them inside. They walked together, side by side. No longer strangers. The air inside was warm, filled with light. The ship knew them, and it accepted them. Just as the ship fully awakened, a sharp alarm rang through the walls. The signal had reached farther than anyone expected. Outside, above the snow, another skyship had entered orbit, black as night, massive and not friendly. The raiders were not finished. They had called for help, and now something bigger was coming. Aria looked at Ray, her voice low, steady. "We fight now." Ray nodded, loading his weapon, and Luma glowed brighter than ever, ready to lead the way. The ship rose from the ice with a sound like thunder trapped in glass. Snow and metal flew into the air as ancient engines burned bright. Aria stood near the front, one hand on the glowing console. Ray stood beside her, eyes locked on the screen, showing the sky above, and Luma sat in the center of the room, pulsing with silver light. The enemy ship hovered just beyond the clouds, huge, black and silent. Its surface shifted like liquid, covered in weapons and armor. It was not here to talk. It was here to erase. But Aria's ship was not weak. It was older than war, older than fear. It had waited for voices that could wake it, and now those voices had spoken. Ray pressed a panel, and shields formed around the ship in layers of blue. Energy hummed through the walls like a beating heart. Aria closed her eyes and let the voice in her mind guide her. The ship responded not just to touch, but to thought, to feeling, and she was ready. Outside, the enemy began to fire. Red beams shot through the sky like arrows. But the shields held strong. The old power was awake now, and it remembered how to protect. Aria gave the command, not with words, but with her soul. The ship twisted in the air, faster than any machine should move. It danced between beams, firing bursts of light that curved like stars falling sideways. Each blast hit with precision, not to destroy but to warn. This was not prey. This was not lost. Ray guided the weapons, hands steady, eyes calm. He fought like he had done this before, not for glory, but for survival, for her, inside the ship. Luma rose into the air again, his body glowing bright. He released another wave of energy, not an attack but a signal, a call that echoed beyond the clouds, through space, into the deep dark where ancient things still listened. The enemy ship paused, as if confused, then suddenly turned, pulling back, retreating into orbit. It vanished into the stars without a word, not defeated by force, but by something it didn't understand. A bond, a voice, a unity too strong to break. Silence returned to the sky. The wind calmed. The ice stopped shaking. Inside the ship, Ray slowly lowered his weapon. Aria looked at him, her breath soft, her hands still glowing. She sat beside Luma and smiled, the first real smile in days. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. Something had changed between them. Not just trust, not just survival. They were linked now, two lives once strangers. Joined by fire, snow, and something deeper, Aria looked at the stars on the screen. The map was open again. So many places, so many paths. Ray walked over and touched one of the blinking stars. The ship hummed in reply, ready to move, to travel, to begin something new. Luma curled up between them, warm and peaceful, his glow dimming as he rested. But the ship remained bright, alive, awake. Aria leaned back in the chair, eyes on the stars. She had once thought she would freeze to death, alone and forgotten, but now she was part of something greater, not a warrior, not a leader, just someone who had followed the cold into something beautiful. And at her side Ray, the strange human who had saved her life without a word, who had stood beside her when no one else did. Together, they had turned ruins into hope. Together, they had called the stars back to life. The engines roared softly, the sky opened, and the ship climbed higher, not escaping, but exploring, not running, but becoming.